From Mark's Gospel, chapter 3, we read this. And the crowd came together again, so that they, the disciples, could not even eat. When Jesus' family heard it, they went out to restrain him, for people were saying, "He has gone out of his mind." And the scribes, who came down from Jerusalem, said, "He has Beelzebul, and by the ruler of demons he casts out demons." And he called them to him and spoke to them in parables. How can Satan cast out Satan? If a kingdom is divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. And if a house is divided against itself, that house will not be able to stand. And if Satan has risen up against himself and is divided, he cannot stand, but his end has come. But no one can enter a strong man's house and plunder his property without first tying up the strong man. Then indeed the house can be plundered. Truly I tell you, people will be forgiven for their sins and whatever blasphemies they utter, but whoever blasphemes against the Holy Spirit can never have forgiveness, but is guilty of an eternal sin. For they had said, "He has an unclean spirit." Then his mother and his brothers came. Standing outside, they sent to him and called him. A crowd was sitting around him, and they said to him, "Your mother and your brothers and sisters are outside asking for you." And he replied, "Who are my mother and my brothers?" And looking at those who sat around him, he said, "Here are my mother and my brothers. Whoever does the will of God is my brother and sister and mother." Human beings can be remarkably resilient. We can be like a strong man's house sometimes, or a strong woman's house. And when we are strong, if we reflect on what makes us strong, what gives us that resilience to withstand all the things that buffet us around in life, well, let me suggest three things that often are some of the biggest supports that we find. And one is, if you like, the court of public opinion. What the crowd says, whether we feel that we are fitting in with what those around us might be thinking and saying, the way in which they're acting and living. One second thing that might make us strong, that does make us strong, is that sense of knowing how we fit into the society in which we live, our sense of identity and the story that we and others can tell about how we got to where we are. And the third thing that I think, and most significantly, gives us that sense of resilience and inner strength will be the support and love we know of those around us, the voices we hear from our nearest and dearest. The crowd, the history we feel a part of, and the voices and the presence of our nearest and dearest. What would any of us be without those three things? Listen to the story from Mark's Gospel at this critical moment in Jesus' ministry. And what strikes me is that actually at this precise moment, Jesus is denied all three of those things, all three of those potential sources of support and affirmation and resilience. Because the crowds that are very evident here, we're at that point where the crowds around Jesus are growing and growing and growing, but the crowds think that Jesus has gone mad. It's not really spelt out why, but that general sense of the priorities Jesus seems to be working towards, the priorities that he's setting and the things that he's doing and the way in which maybe he's challenging those around him just seem to be quite contrary to where the popular mood is. Jesus has gone mad. And so that buttress to his sense of resilience, it's gone, it's fallen. And then we're told by Mark that the scribes from Jerusalem have come down. Now, the scribes from Jerusalem, of course, are the upholders of tradition, the ones who can tell Jews of Jesus' age where they fit into the story of God's purposes, how they are to understand the sense of purpose and belonging of the people of Israel. Well, they don't accuse Jesus of being mad. They accuse him of being an agent of Satan himself. Jesus is not just mad, but he is evil. He is bad. And then, of course, and crucially in this story, Jesus is denied the support of the crowd. He's denied the support of the upholders, the tradition of the community. But of course, it is his family themselves who come to take control of Jesus. Because Jesus, it must have seemed to them, was stepping outside of the fold of the family and needs to be brought back within it. So at this precise moment, Jesus is denied those three buttresses that we would normally rely on, we human beings, for our resilience and our sense of who we are, what we stand for, and how we can be agents in the world. In that situation of profound challenge, what does Jesus do? Bearing in mind a natural human reaction when we are denied those sources of support and buttress, the temptation is always to look inwards, for our horizons to get smaller, for us to adopt a defensive attitude. But Jesus here, and in other places in the gospel where he is under the greatest pressure, it seems to me, does precisely the opposite. And in terms of his definition of family at this point, and family, of course, is absolutely crucial, not just for Jesus as a human being, but Jesus as a Jew, Jesus as part of the nation of Israel, which has always seen itself as God's family. Jesus actually expands his definition of who family is. Those who do the will of God, whoever. Now that is a huge, expansive definition of who belongs to this family. So not a contraction down, but an expansion out of who is included in the invitation to be part of God's family and the doing of God's will. And I wonder, being part of a church which is under pressure, and which, to a large extent, can see some of the buttresses to our own identity disappearing from us in the modern world. How do we respond to our sense of being family church, being part of the family of God? Is it to make our definition of family steadily smaller and more exclusive? Or is it, and I would suggest it should be, if we're true to our calling of Jesus, to have that same switch of attitude precisely at the moments of greatest pressure, to think of family, to think of church family in inclusive and expansive ways. How can we become a truly intergenerational community that is inclusive of those who respond to the call of God and can be part with us in the living out of God's will?